This is The Raid, exposing the dark world of America's deportation machine. I'm your host, John Carlos Frey. Claudia Morales is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Her work is rooted in community organizing. She collaborates with organizations and individuals ready to embrace new approaches to solution-seeking grounded in transformative justice, liberation, and nervous system regulation, while applying ancestral intergenerational wisdom to sustain meaningful progress. Her approach is not just about conceptual change, but about daily embodiment, where new habits of expansion and love are integrated into every dimension of life. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And the reason that I wanted you to come is because of what the community that you serve is experiencing. We don't talk about trauma. We don't talk about what happens to people psychologically. And I'm not just talking about the people who may be apprehended. We're all watching what's happening to these people almost live. We see it every day on our phones. Mm-hmm. We see it on television. I don't remember even being a reporter covering immigration. I don't remember this time in our history. There have always been apprehensions, but there never been this kind of violence, this kind of covert operation where people are masked. We don't even know who they are, and it's brutal. So you're a therapist and you deal specifically with this community. Are some of the people being apprehended your clients?
Yes, some of the people that I treat have family members, or they're also in the community trying to protect their neighbors from being harmed. And there's vicarious trauma. It's continuous, complex trauma. We talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, but when there's a therapist from Palestine who said that there's also trauma that just is never post. It's just continual stress disorder. Because if the violence doesn't end, we're constantly coping with the trauma as we're also accumulating new traumas. And of course, witnessing other people suffering is very bad for our psyche and our nervous systems, for our immune systems, our brains. When we're in crisis, we don't even have access to our frontal lobes, so we're not even really thinking clearly. So it's very important that we have any and all of the ways that we can ground ourselves, which is a really central part of my practice.
Can you describe to me what you're seeing in the community, psychologically, trauma-based? What are some of the effects of the ICE raids?
So much fear, so much terror, so much pain and suffering. A lot of the practice that I do is also unlearning abuse patterns from domestic violence or family violence. But we see that there's so many norms of abuse taking place in our structures.
Institutionalized abuse, you mean?
Yes. And so people are enduring abuse. They're victims of abuse. And in some ways, some people are normalizing those patterns, such as, isolating people, manipulation, coercion, threats, secrecy. There's a lot of secrecy. Abuse thrives in secrecy and in pretending. So what it creates is a victim that in some ways upholds the abuser, puts the abuser on a pedestal. So there's so many things that you can learn from working with traumatized individuals that have been traumatized in their families that you could just see in the larger society as people try to endure this abuse. They try to assimilate it. Or you can also take the route of outright rejecting it, which is very difficult because you have to be very strong, and you have to undo everything you believed before. You have to sort of walk out of the spell of holding anyone above you or below you. People are just people, all with their own inherent value. But I do think a lot of the assumptions that upheld this abuse are sort of falling away, such as putting rich people or celebrities on a pedestal. I see that breaking. That illusion is sort of breaking. Or the norm of just, it's very cool not to care. People are caring so much more than I've ever seen. And that gives me a lot of hope, including in my community where we've been completely impacted by these ICE raids. A lot of our neighbors are just getting taken, abused, beaten. And I've done a lot of, on a volunteer basis, a lot of aftercare, know your rights, or in some cases documenting what's happening so that we can protect our neighbors through the legal system. Because we know it's wrong. It feels completely wrong. And we're stronger when we do it together, though. I've been through bouts of deep horror and I still go through it sometimes, and deep fear. But when I see my neighbors have so much courage standing up for one another, and we kind of pump each other up, it reminds me of the way geese fly. This is a friend of mine taught me about this, Charmaine Jackman, that geese flying in formation is how we have to be in a moment like this. Because one person leads and others follow, but they stay in formation, and then they take turns and they rest. But the ones that are following honk each other on so that the leader stays feeling strong when they're in front.
Interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned it already, but the effect on those of us who are witnessing this. You're calling the system, I don't want to put words in your mouth so you can correct me, but I'm taking from what you're saying, you're calling this system of apprehension abusive. Mm-hmm. It's law enforcement. It's handcuffs and guns and arresting people. So just by the very nature of it, it's abusive. But I don't think that you're describing it in a law enforcement structure, right? I mean, you're pointing your finger at it as something that's gone beyond law enforcement.
Yes. So there are also abuses in the police, but in every system that is upheld by coercion and threats, and that doesn't take time to repair. But there's really good examples of policing that has been led by the community and is no longer enforcing abusive patterns, but it has to be done very intentionally. It's not going to happen by accident.
That was sort of what I wanted to bring up. We're sort of coming off of this era of police brutality, Black Lives Matter, pointing our fingers at, changing the system and respecting all individuals. And now we're here. We've gone backward, it seems like. I'm wondering if you think that the administration knows what they're doing. Some people say that the abuse and the fear that they're driving into communities is the point. They're doing this on purpose.
Of course.
They're not trying, to be abusive here. They're actually trying to be abusive. It's a tactic to get people to obey, to get people to deport themselves. Mm-hmm. So
it's meant to instill fear,
of course,
in all of us. But what has happened, in addition to their horrors and their abuses and their sadistic, for lack of a better word, their sadistic ways of operating.
Why do you say sadistic? You think they enjoy it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're under the delusion that there are better people and less important people, that some people can be thrown in the fire to warm them up. But if you take on the belief that all people are valuable, no matter what, you would never dream of doing that. You would feel the suffering in your bones, and you wouldn't shrink from that, because it takes a lot of unlearning to undo the white supremacy that we've normalized within us. It's kind of ego shattering, but that act in itself is a sacred act because we can just use the privileges that we have to be there for our neighbors.
Can you unpack that a little bit more? Because I got lost. I'm following you a little bit, but there was a double negative there that I couldn't follow. Just, if you don't mind, this idea of normalizing white supremacy, you're sort of making a statement that what we're seeing is oppression of a race of people or a color?
Yes, it's that hierarchy that some people are more worthy of self-actualization than others. In every part of our society, that's been upheld for a long time, but this is more of a peaking of it. I think that there's the delusion that they're operating under is that if people have rights, that they are suffering because they only want to see themselves as superior to others. But if you see the inherent value of all people, then you find joy in protecting your neighbors, in feeding your neighbors, in sitting with your neighbors when they're suffering, in getting to know them. You don't uphold someone above you, and you definitely don't expect anyone to be below you. You know?
You're describing a system of cruelty inherent in the system itself. On the surface, if I'm watching television or listening to the President of the United States, he's going to tell me that we have invaders in the country. We have rapists. We have bad people, as he calls them. So we need to ramp up law enforcement because they're ruining this country. It's a part of the reason why he thinks that this country is going downhill. So doesn't it make sense to get rid of the bad seeds and to do what law enforcement does?
There's ways of correcting harm that are not solely focused on punishment, because punishment, revenge, retaliation, scapegoating, none of that has any evidence to back it. But this is not an administration that appreciates evidence or best practices. But we have to contend with reality, not the delusion of dominance. That's what I prefer to call it, other than white supremacy, the delusion that anyone could be dominant over anyone else, because that's very short-sighted. Maybe that person will feel good for a tiny amount of time, but have you ever seen this president look satisfied? I've never seen it, and I've never seen anyone as privileged as him. So obviously having all the wealth and power in the world isn't enough to find satisfaction, but there's practices we can do every day to feel satisfaction. And it's usually in the way we connect with one another in the simplest and freest ways. It doesn't actually cost that much money. So our fear keeps us strong, but it also keeps us spending money, desperate for answers, throwing money at answers for people that have means. And for those that don't have means, it keeps people blaming the poor for their own problems, scapegoating. But all of that fear just makes people easier to manipulate and distract. But it doesn't cause anyone any satisfaction. I don't even think the administration is satisfied because they don't seem to have a good practice of practicing that muscle. It's something you have to work on.
Why do you think then, maybe from a psychological perspective, that they're even doing this? Do they firmly believe that brown people crossing the border is the reason that the United States is suffering economically or socially? Or is there something deeper? Is there some sort of deep-seated, unresolved issue that we're watching play itself out?
Another thing I observe a lot in families and that we learn about is attachment theory. So disorganized attachment, if someone experiences disorganized attachment in childhood, that means that they misread care as repulsive because maybe their caregiver was very abusive to them and harmed them in a very fundamental way. They might misread cruelty as power and something to admire for the same reasons, because inherently as babies, as children, we are evolutionarily wired to adore our parents. It's something that's so deeply wired within us. Because if we're babies and we realize the truth of our parents, we might wander off and choose a different family, but that wouldn't be good for us, right? So even in situations where a child's deeply abused, they still put their parents on a pedestal because it's an evolutionary trait. But if you realize some of the harms that were caused in your family, you can unlearn them. It just takes a lot of practice. And then you don't perpetuate those things. But if a person refuses to see any of the ills that have happened to them and they simply dig in deeper and see it as their whole identity, then they will continue to perpetuate hate and the cycle of violence.
So you're watching ICE agents and people who are telling ICE agents what to do coming from a place of cruelty equals power and authority?
Yes.
That's what you see when you see the ICE raids.
Yes, it's a disrupted, fractured attachment. And we can all unlearn what has happened to us as children. It wasn't our fault. We were innocent, but it's imperative if we want to be caring people to unlearn it somehow, if not through therapy, through many other means. But we can't continue to pretend that everything was okay, because that just causes more fracturing in your psyche. Because, some people say, I compartmentalize, I'm fine, but that, to me, that sounds like a fractured psyche. If we're congruent, we could be at peace with our decisions, our values, our actions. There's a little bit more flow within all of those things.
So me being negatively affected by watching someone being pulled out of their car and thrown onto the pavement and being pummeled by ICE agents, I get negatively affected by that. It's because I have an instinct to want to care for that individual, right? I'm wanting to show compassion or empathy for what's happening here. It doesn't sit well with me at all.
It doesn't feel good, but that's actually a good thing that it doesn't. So it's not bad for us as humanity to feel pain when our neighbors are suffering. I think that that's actually very valuable, but it should be used in action. It's only through action that we can repair. So if I come together with my community and we make each other stronger, that's kind of alchemizing this experience, and it's fuel to make us stronger, make our neighbors feel better, safer, like they're valuable. And although we can't change everything about it, we can play our part in making a difference. And that's all we have to do, because it's only that same delusion of dominance that we were talking about that says, I have to have all the answers. I have to be this individualistic hero. That's not true. We all have to take a part in what we want to see in the world actively and be that, whether it's just feeding your neighbor or buying flowers from the vendor, telling them that they matter, finding a way to protect the most vulnerable people in our neighborhoods. It feels really good in a very fundamental way. And it's not something that can be purchased, but it can be done for free using our own hands,
I want to play a little scenario that I saw yesterday on on a clip. A bystander filmed a woman who was driving her car, and for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, you'll be able to see this clip on YouTube. She's driving her car. An ICE vehicle, unmarked, rammed her from the side, pushed her into the curb, forcing her to stop her vehicle. They pulled ahead. They opened her car. There's about 3 or 4 agents with guns drawn. She had no idea what was happening, at least according to the testimony. They opened her car door. She was in a seatbelt. They started grabbing her by the legs, pulling her out of her vehicle. She's screaming that she's a U.S. citizen. They're not paying attention to her, and they throw her onto the pavement on her stomach to handcuff her behind her back. This all took about 20 seconds. It was very, very fast. And the woman, you could tell by her face, was mortified. She was frightened, and who wouldn't be? I'm wondering if you can just sort of describe that person in that vehicle and what's happening to her. What is going to happen to her? How is she going to? I mean, I'm assuming this is like being robbed or raped, or this is a serious violation to this person's humanity.
Right. So in this moment, I hope that she's being well supported with a lot of legal support, community support. So a lot of what happens is in the aftermath of trauma. So we know a lot about how trauma can feel and how it can cause nightmares, hypervigilance, accelerated heart rate, somatic symptoms, body pain, all kinds of havoc on our nervous systems in the short term and in the very long term. And we also know that what happens in the immediate aftermath is very important as well, because if she's met with love, support, and guidance from her community and from others that understand that we should all be completely outraged by this in a very just way. There's nothing wrong with feeling rage or anger. We've all been told that those are wrong emotions by this delusion, another delusion of like false positivity, that we have to make it all positive. No, we have to see things as they are in order to make an assessment of what needs to happen next. So if we can lean into this individual, I also saw that video was horrifying. Among many others, I've also seen things in person that were horrifying as well. And it's brutal. So it very much matters what we do next. What's the next best thing we can do?
What about the individuals who are either filming or me watching this? Am I suffering trauma?
Yes. And we're also suffering the normalization of a malignant pathology. We're seeing in some ways the normalization of that, but our rejection of that is very important for us to create balance in society, and maybe for the first time, you know.
So if I'm witnessing that I'm negatively affected, your suggestion is to do something about it? Mm-hmm. Do you have suggestions? You mentioned a few, I know, to sort of participate in your community and maybe volunteer, or do you have any thoughts about how I'm really negatively affected and what I might do with that emotion?
Sure. There's so many ways to help. But I would say sometimes we are not sometimes, almost all the time, we're in an information overload of, our society relies a lot on on language and data dumping, trauma dumping on us, really, so that we are so numb that we do nothing. But whatever you can do, just knowing that you do that, even if it's one thing every day. I mean, you can definitely volunteer with Chirla. There's some wonderful things that they do. You can get to know your unhoused neighbors. You can start a food pantry in front of your house. You can, anything that we can do with our own hands that lends itself towards mutual care is going to repair us, not just individually in that moment, but as a society. And I'm sure it's a reaction to these times, but we can move through it. None of these feelings are permanent. We can reach for our own nervous systems, go on a walk, be exposed to nature, like in your beautiful garden. When human beings feel very hard to understand, I really do like to observe nature. And there's a really beautiful book called Braiding Sweetgrass. I don't know if you've read it.
I have it.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah, so in her observation of nature, she's learning both about herself, right, and her ancestors and what to do next and how to care in ways that can feel vague because very few people have a very clear understanding of where their ancestors came from. But I think the delusional part of white supremacy is assuming that they have to come from some kind of royalty. Like, what if they were just really humble farmers? What if they just were connected to the land? And what if that's okay? Like, what if that's our way back to ourselves? So I really believe that there's a lot of truth in that. But we are also part of nature, so returning to what makes us part of nature.
That's a nice list. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. I want to throw a wrench in everything that you've said. Mm-hmm. This is a tactic. Mm-hmm. This is a totalitarian tactic to instill fear, mm-hmm. to overpower, to overwhelm, to traumatize, to get mm-hmm. people to numb out, yes. to get people to obey, mm-hmm. To take orders. If you don't, you're going to have hell to pay. This is all part of a very well-grooved playbook. You can take a look at overthrown governments that had a dictator. Pretty much the same kind of mm-hmm. process going on before our eyes, where a free society becomes a controlled society through the tactic of fear. Do you see that happening here? Do you see the administration winning? I see them taking over. They're not taking no for an answer. It doesn't really matter. Norms, justice, court rulings, public outcry, they're taking over, and they have a way of doing it. And what we're seeing with the ICE raids is one of those tactics.
Yes, I agree that it is. We've seen this playbook again and again. That's another way of being an observation, right? We see how it works, and we see how damaging it is. But we also see so many cracks in it. I mean, I'm thinking of two works of art, The Wizard of Oz and El Ahogado Más Hermoso del Mundo. It's a book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
I don't know the book.
A short story called The Drowned Man, who's the most beautiful one in the world. So the bloated corpse of a man washes ashore in a small island, and the islanders all start worshiping this bloated corpse and projecting qualities onto them. So I feel like this administration is like that. We've been conditioned so much to adore wealth, to adore wealthy people, prosperity gospel. It's even been imbued in every part of our culture and many religions to worship wealth. But people are just projecting their own qualities onto someone that's not for them. So I think it's time to reclaim our human qualities and see ourselves as precious too, not seeing them as more than us or better than us. So,
do you have something to say about the people who may be falling prey to the ideology of a takeover of a totalitarian government? He's right. It's a lot of people who are supporting what's happening.
If people are operating just out of fear, I think it's much more dangerous. Like if you only want to be safe, which is natural, right? We want to be safe. And in these times, almost anything you do is some kind of risk, right? But doing nothing is a much greater risk because we're telling the administration that it's okay, that we are on board with what's happening. So if you have any doubts, trust your doubts. We've been taught not to trust our doubts, but sometimes our doubts give us very valuable information. So see the cracks. They're falling apart under the weight of their own hubris and sadism and cruelty, because it doesn't make sense. It's very short. It's a short-sighted strategy because we're only going to be okay if we're in congruence with our brothers and sisters and our neighbors and nature. So destruction isn't really a long-term plan. But we've also been conditioned to just think that we can find someone to blame. And maybe people do have fault. We all have fault. We all cause harm. If we just accept that we all cause harm and repair when we cause harm, we're not running from that reality. Instead, we're just saying, yeah, that's normal to cause harm. If someone has caused harm, we can repair. So blame is kind of futile in that case. It loses its power because you can't just find a group of people to assign qualities or attributes to. You could just look within and do the best you can with what you have, but you don't have to fall for that type of manipulation. It's a tactic of manipulation. And it's the same thing an abuser would do in a domestic violence situation. Nobody loves you, love bombing. Nobody loves you the way I will. No one will understand you, isolating them from people with different beliefs and stoking fear. I mean, we live in a very multicultural state of California, so we know people of all different religions and races, and due to our exposure, we're not afraid of them. We celebrate these differences. We would never, well, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I know that if you grew up here too, you probably just inherently feel welcomed oftentimes in other cultures, even if they're not exactly the same. And you learn from other people. But people who don't have exposure to other folks are easier to manipulate, especially if they feel a refusal to be exposed. But there is some really interesting white organizing that's happening. A friend of mine and a brilliant organizer named Adam Krugel was organizing in Appalachia, and he's white, and he'll have it's a lot of folks having conversations. Have you ever met a refugee? Have you ever met an immigrant? Oftentimes they haven't. Mm. So as soon as they're exposed, their ideology already changes by 30% because they're realizing, oh, we have a common humanity. I can feel it. Your senses have information that are valuable to you. But that's another way that we're groomed, in a way, to distrust our bodies, our senses, our feelings, and run away from difficult sensations or feelings. But the more we're listening to those sensations and understanding and just sitting with them sometimes until we can understand and gathering more information, then we can integrate the new information instead of just continuing the repetitive lie of manipulation that an abuser would
Have you
say.
ever, sorry, have you ever had, and just a couple more points here. Mm-hmm. This is really great and helpful.
Thanks.
I mean, I'm learning as I'm sitting here listening to you, so I really appreciate.
I appreciate you too.
The thing I struggle with
Thank
the
you.
most is this thought that I have that they're wrong. And I don't want to excuse them. I don't want to talk to them. I want to cut them out of my life because they don't think the way that I do. They don't see the world the way that I do, and I want them to get what I know. Because they don't listen. They're stubborn. They believe this ideology. They believe that what Trump is doing is right. So how do I speak to somebody who's on the opposite side of the fence here, who sees life completely different? Do I even have an in? Is there something that I can say?
So I use transformative justice a lot in my practice as a way of understanding repair when there is harm. Some repair runs really deeply, right? It really depends on the person. Is that person willing to talk to you?
Usually not. They're so entrenched in their ideology that they're not willing. I'm the enemy.
And are they willing to talk to someone else that might share your ideology? You know, sometimes it has to come from someone else. As a woman and as a half Colombian, Spanish-speaking person, there's a lot of people who will not take guidance from me, and that's okay. But maybe coming from someone else that might be more impactful on them. So sometimes I call on allies like Adam, or, you know, that's why him using his whiteness in that manner is so valuable, because that's the whole point. We're using the privilege that we have to turn to our neighbors and say, hey, try it like this. Like, have you considered, But if we can't do it, maybe someone else can do it. But it's about doing what we can do. You don't have to solve the whole thing. You just have to play the part that you can when you see an opportunity to jump in.
So the last thing, which is very provocative to me, are your earrings.
Mm-hmm.
They say...
Abolish ICE.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I actually got these, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago. Because what ICE is doing is, the cruelty is not new. It has definitely peaked. But the cruelty is not new. Parents have been separated from children. I used to work with unaccompanied minors who came here from Central South America, all the way from Africa. There's some kids that came all the way from Africa, moving through 7 countries just to find their footing, try to find a way to survive. But there's children that foraged their way here. They're some of the bravest people I have ever met. And just spending time with them as their therapist would leave me in awe. I still feel a huge debt of gratitude to just be in their presence. But what kind of world threatens the safety of children in any country? Oftentimes the wars that are caused or the corporate bullying that happens. In some cases, most of them were indigenous and they were bullied out of their land by corporations. And they wouldn't get asylum because this country doesn't consider that abuse. It's very interesting, isn't it? So there's a lot of abuse that happens on such a large scale that has not been accounted for, atoned for, or repaired, that people have assimilated as normal, that is absolutely beyond abuse. It's massive abuses to the world's children everywhere. So they wouldn't come here if they weren't being bullied out of safety. They would probably want to live where they grow up. Or if they chose to move, that's fine too. I mean, animals, you see the animals in your garden, they go from place to place. They're not really confined to these limitations. So we've just been taught to fear a boogeyman in the United States, but that's very convenient for anyone that wants to misuse it.
Well, that's on purpose. That's the point. The abuse is the point. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, her earrings are very large hoop earrings that have the words in them that say abolish ICE. I'm hearing you say you're not necessarily suggesting getting rid of the actual law enforcement entity. You want to abolish everything that it stands for.
The cruelty. Yes.
Immigration enforcement in and of itself is not what you're talking about here. You're talking about the abusive system.
The abuses. Yes. And we can look at the underlying causes of these abuses and hold those folks accountable. I think it's really a way of the world right now to punish the most vulnerable and the poorest people among us, just to make an excuse to take their resources. I mean, that's, in my opinion, that is what we need to really abolish the most.
I'm wondering how you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're on the front lines. You're seeing people who have been traumatized. You're in community and witnessing the actual live events.
Mm-hmm. It's been very difficult and terrifying and overwhelming. Sometimes my body completely shuts down. I notice I need to sleep a lot more and move a lot more. But whenever I fall into despair, I've realized a lot of things. This time is going to bring up people the worst in people, because we're all in a collective crisis and in a perpetual trauma. It does not bring out the best in us. However, when we're dysregulated emotionally, physically, when we get to those places of hopelessness, all we have to do is turn to somebody that's doing something more courageous than us, and it gives you so much strength to just put another foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I'm doing as best as I can because I love the work that I do. I love serving my clients. I love seeing their progress. And especially in times like these, it gives me awe when people can repair their own psyches, their own bodies in times like these and still move forward to become a better version of themselves. Not just for themselves. It's always about and your neighbors and your loved ones and your family. I'm not of the belief of just me by myself, cut everyone off, who cares? That's not sustainable. But when I see that happening, it gives me a boost of courage and strength. And a friend of mine, Dulce, we're working on some workbooks together about reaching for the medicine of our ancestors. She's from Mexican descent, and we are working on an image of the condor and the eagle kind of coming together, because the condor is symbol of South America. And she says that in times like these, we have to let our hearts break open. So allowing that pain to just make you feel more and invite more of what helps as well. And if you feel rage or sorrow, let it fuel what you need to do next and just take the next best thing that you can do using what you have.
We had a black president not too long ago. We had gay marriage that was indoctrinated into law not too long ago. We have been told that we have to treat this person that way and that person that way. And there's an entire population of people who may have felt marginalized. They might not agree with some of these edicts. They might even resent the fact that they're being asked to expand their horizon or to be more open-minded. And it seems like that population is the population in power now that almost gives a big middle finger to things like diversity and inclusion and equity. They're almost going 180 degrees in the opposite direction to tamp down those kinds of open-minded approaches, or going against woke people. There's that whole resentment ideology that fuels Trump. You talk a little bit about your understanding about that thought process?
Yes, because it's a fear of looking at the parts of us that were indoctrinated. It's a fear. I mean, I'm a very light-skinned person, so obviously I get a lot of privileges too, in some ways. But it's mixed, as a woman, and like I said, because of being the child of immigrants and having some poverty, it's a mix of privilege and oppression. But if someone's pride is getting in the way of looking at their own role in things, their own oppression, maybe it's time for them letting their own egos scatter and see what's left and see what else they might become.
Thank you. And for the last, you've touched on it throughout our conversation, but we are all in a state of overwhelm. You admitted it about yourself as well, and you had some things that you do to get yourself back into your body. What do we do as a society when the big hand of government and the large size of the force is barreling ahead? I feel disempowered when I see this happen. I feel like I can't do anything. I can't do anything if the president knocks down the East Wing, and I can't do anything if he's hiring 10,000 more ICE agents and spending a lot more money to deport people.
You can't do anything, or you can't do everything?
I'm asking you what I can do.
do everything in your power, in your hands, in your relationships, with your skills, with your experience, with your wisdom. Just do everything you can as a human being. And also take care of yourself as one of those people. Go on walks, feed your birds, have a creative practice, and don't let anyone take your humanity from you. Because when you humanize yourself, then you don't need to be superior to anyone, and you can also rebuild strength to have a clear mind to do the things that are within your power.
Do you see that happening? You said you had hope.
I do have hope because I work with so many people that have gone through unspeakable traumas that overcome them. And then not only that, they become leaders in their community. Tamisha Walker is someone who I didn't work with as a client, but I got to know her when I was in community organizing. She was in prison, and she got out of prison, regained her family, and started the Safe Return Project because that existed. It was a place where formerly incarcerated people could find meaningful labor, and they started organizing in their community of Richmond, California. And with that power, with that job, because they got a chance, because the alternative would be reoffending, right? Selling drugs again. What can you do with $200 in your pocket when you have to earn your family back and find your kids, no housing, So having a meaningful job made all the difference in the world. So she and all the other people at the Safe Return Project were able to stop a prison from being built. And they changed Richmond from being one of the highest murder capitals in the country to one of the least. And the community itself would look out for each other. They would patrol the streets. They would look out for each other. They would make sure that the hot spots were being addressed. And so they reduced crime. They stopped the bullying and the racial profiling that was happening. But not only that, but a bunch of other people who had formerly been incarcerated went on to get their doctorates and become leaders in different communities all throughout. So you can't punish just dispose of people. People are not disposable. So if we make mistakes, we can repair, but people have to be given a way to climb up, and they'll work wonders and create miracles with their chances that they get. So it's not a bad thing to feel shame. I know that we run from shame, but sometimes shame is there for a good reason. Maybe it's protecting a part of our ego that's too rigid, and maybe that's the part that we ourselves have to shatter by being more curious. So if shame is stopping people from caring about other people that are not like them, maybe it's time to just look at their shame and be more curious about that discomfort. We all have to live with discomfort, but it's what we do with that discomfort. We can't run from discomfort and remain human.
Would it be fair to say, in trying to simplify, if I'm feeling overwhelmed by what I'm witnessing and seeing, that I need to take care of myself?
Yes.
And I also need to get involved.
Yes. Like the geese example, they all take roles at different times, right? And sometimes they land and just take naps. So maybe you need to take a walk around your block. Maybe it's time to feed your birds. Maybe it's time to stretch, move, use other parts of your knowing that don't have to do with social media. Social media, by design, is addictive, but it makes people very isolated. So some of the things that I think could help us is some of the old-fashioned things, like just potlucks, getting to know our neighbors. There's so many things, but if it teaches you how to move through that discomfort, because again, people are dysregulated. So even in those actions, we still might be confronted with some pain that people are bringing to the surface. But the more we can sit with that discomfort and stay focused on caring and loving more and more and more, it could never misguide us.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Raid, available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about our guests and the subjects we cover, please visit our website at theraidpodcast.org.